All right. Hi, this is Kevin A. Davis with Ink Pub, and today we're here to interview Chris Burns. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself so people get to know who we're talking to?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name's Chris Burns. I'm a writer and a librarian based out of San Francisco. As a day job, I'm an academic librarian for community colleges. And then at night, I try to write as much as possible. And in the meantime, I just, hang out and relax and try to have a good time.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So, do you have any? I'm not. Do you do any long form or is it all short form? I know you from the short form, but do you do long form as well, like
I
longer
actually
novels?
do long form, and I really do like it. I have one novel right now I'm shopping around. So that's my big project. I've written other ones, which, were fun, but I knew even as writing them that they weren't going to go in that direction. But I do like long form a lot, and for reading and for writing.
Okay, good. So, what projects do you have right now? Anything s- specific, or what do you got going on?
My biggest thing, and I found that it really interrupted all my other projects, is that I do have a novel and writing it is a lot of fun, and the publishing part less so often. So I'm shopping that around, and a lot of my free creative time, I think to myself, like I could write this story I'm working on, or I should, let's contact some people and see how we can do with that. So that's my biggest project. As side projects, I am writing another story or two. I kind of always am, just in the background, working on a couple things, but nothing too serious at the moment. Was just published with you, which is great, and I have a few others out there, but in the process of being put into anthologies or whatever. But as far as new projects, I'm really trying to focus my energy on the book and staying serious about that.
Good, good. All right. So what is your preferred genre? Do you have a, outside of just fantasy global or such, do you have any specific genre areas that you like to write in, or is it pretty open?
Fairly open. My preferred genre is science fiction for writing and for reading. But I write a lot of normal fiction. I write a fair amount of, science fiction subgenres, dystopia, etc. But science fiction is really my number one and like where my heart is. Just not all stories apply to that. So I come up with other ideas and go with them. I write a lot of stories outside of that take place at fairs or circuses. So, as anybody in my MFA program learned, that I was writing science fiction, but probably the next story I was going to turn in took place in a state fair or something like that, and it was not something that was apparent or like in my bio, but would happen.
Nice, nice. There's a publisher I know, Chris Kennedy. He does a lot of but he's always looking for like really prolific. I mean, like, amount of writing, but he does a lot of sci-fi and has published a friend of mine, Diane, I think she's got like 8 books with him now over the past couple of years. That's the kind of level he likes. But Chris Kennedy does a lot of that sci-fi production that is just great as far as actually having some, presence. Um, all right, so we know you're shopping out the novel. We know you got, some pieces you're writing. Beyond the novel, is there any big projects on the horizon that you're looking to get to? I mean, novel, is it a series or is it a standalone? Are you looking for to move on to that, or are you aiming for something, another standalone or something?
That one is standalone. Not that I couldn't write kind of side books off of it because you can always do that. But it was written as standalone. And then I kind of have a list after that of what my next one will be and what my next one will be. So I'm envisioning the next one. I probably will start at some point soon, at least dabbling with it, just because I, need to be writing creatively. But that is really almost all my focus is on that. I'm not too worried about big projects afterwards. And we'll,
Okay,
like seeing where that goes will have a lot of bearing on what I do next. But I do know what my next book will probably be.
good, good.
And whether I start it next week or next month is a question.
Yeah, I tend to be very OCD about all my projects, black box. So it's like I get very locked into, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. So for me, I have a very, solid one. Um,
Planned out. Sounds like it's very like organized and ready.
in my case, especially since I have a number of series going, I'm constantly producing the next in the series to stimulate the sales of the series.
Mhm.
So, the more you get of those, the more irons you have in the fire as the year goes along.
Yeah.
So now you're in a beautiful area up there. Outside of your literary pursuits and over at the library, what else do you get to do for fun? What
Uh,
takes up your time?
yeah, great question. I love going to museums and galleries. Certainly, San Francisco has a number of really nice museums, so there's always a new exhibition. I'm on the mailing list for a lot of the art galleries in town, so going to see what they're doing or what events they're throwing. And then outside of that, just, the area is great. There's always something to do, but it will tend to be more just like, maybe see a movie, something more relaxing than that.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah, that's the weather can be constructive here, not because it's bad, but because it's never great. There's not as much outside stuff that I'm interested in. Like I could do, but often, and at that point in the week, it's just like, I'm tired. I'll relax instead.
Yeah, I think you have to drive a little bit to really get into some of the more open areas, but there is spots up north of you that are gorgeous.
Yeah, and there's beautiful parks, and we're not far from the redwoods. All that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So you mentioned, you know, your your periods of writing, a lot of discussion out there, and there's going to be some authors watching this. Um, everyone has a different way to get those words out. Whether it is, a dedicated time every morning and then, or every time they come home from work, or, whatever they have their thing. Some people it's like I write on the weekends, or off my off time. Um, what's your rhythm of writing? Is it fairly organized, or is it something that you take as you find the spirit? H- Explain a little bit so that other writers out there can sort of empathize with the scenario and find out whether they can see that in their own life.
Sure. And we do all have our own kind of structures and systems for that, right? I find I wish it was a little more organized than it is. I do tend to write, I stay up late, so I tend to write a lot late at night, or, that's when I will have a little bit more free time, that there's no interruptions. My wife goes to sleep earlier than I do. The dog's down, and I can just do uninterrupted time. But a big thing with me is that my schedule changes 3 times a year because of my work. So new semesters, I get new hours. So
Okay.
I can't have a schedule that lasts more than 6 months ever. So there's some good things there. I do have days where I'll work late or where I'll come home from work early, and I always try to block that time off in my head, assuming no major errand gets in the way. So my writing time is almost always the day that I'm off work early and no one's around, or the day that I go to work in the afternoon, and then I can try to slip time in the morning, and I have to do laundry around it, the normal stuff of life. And so I don't always get to it. And I wish there was a more structured system that I did. The authors that sit down at the same time every day and get writing done, I'm very respectful of that because I've never been able to pull it off for very long. And then I just have to squeeze it in when I can.
I have a friend of mine who's very neurodiverse and absolutely, gets going on some of these authors that like they school as if this is the way to do it. You have to, dedicate this many time, and they're like, that's fine if that's your style, if that fits your normative behavior. But, just assuming that everyone else plugs into that little spot, it could actually ruin their writing rather than be anything constructive. I always find I'll take a tidbit here or there, give it a shot. If I don't like it, move on because not everyone's for everything, but sometimes I've learned things that are very good. One of the things Brandon Sanderson mentioned about making time for family because he's a prolific writer and tends to get engrossed in his writing, which can be me. And to make that dedicated time where, like, there's no writing during this time. This is family time. And I was like, okay, well, that's something I can grab onto because it's a warning for me not to obsess.
Yeah.
I'm definitely OCD, so that could really, turn into a mess. So sometimes you find a tidbit, sometimes it's just sort of like, not really for me. We'll try.
I like that because it's the opposite of the way we normally talk about this, which is like, what is your time to write? But what is your time for life? What is your time for other things? What is
Yeah,
your time to sleep in when you could wake up early and write? I'm not going to do that, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
And we do need family time and we do need meals and we do need, other comfort stuff.
yeah. So do you like to read?
I do like to read. Actually, I read every day. It never really initially was about like, again, I don't sleep well and I learned to read at night, way, way back when I was a child, as a way to put myself to sleep eventually. So I still read every day, but it's normally kind of before I go to bed.
So what do you like to read?
Uh, I like to read science fiction and fiction the most. I alternate in nonfiction as almost like I feel like I have to, like I'll get one and every third book will be a nonfiction or something. I work in libraries, so I have no access or no lack of access to new things, to recommendations, to all of that. So there's
Yep.
always something. But yeah, I tend to read fiction and science fiction the most. And after that, whatever somebody recommends. One of my favorite things to do is to not like a book enough to keep reading it so I can put it down and move on to the next one. Like the list never goes away. So I'm fine taking recommendations, and if I don't like them, I'm fine walking away.
Yeah.
And so there's always something new. And sometimes it is, if it's to put myself to sleep and it's a really exciting action book, that can backfire. Things like that will happen. But,
Yeah. Did you ever get to read The Expanse, James S. A. Corey?
I didn't actually get to read it. I did watch the show when it was first out, of course, because I feel like everybody in our genre did.
Yeah.
And it's been recommended a lot. Sometimes I struggle with starting series because the longer they are, the more I'm committing time to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's always I only start maybe one series a year for that reason. I try to read more standalone things, or if it's something really long that like I know there's not going to be sequels that keep coming out forever, sequels or series that are still being written.
Yeah.
I'm always a little more cagey on because like then you end up with 25 books by John Scalzi you have to keep reading forever, like and they're
Yeah.
all great, but
Yeah.
so I haven't actually started The Expanse. I've heard nothing but good things.
Yeah, it was a recommendation. Did the same. I watched the show, but friends had been recommending the books as well. And after I watched the first season, I dug into the books because I just do that. And so there's like three books that go beyond the series, which is sort of fun because you have that extra knowledge of what happens afterwards. Anyway, it was one of the ones that I do it. So over the past, let's say, 12 months, do you have one book that you turn around and recommend that you'd
Uh,
say this is something I would suggest to just about anyone to read?
Yeah, it took me a while to get to it. It was from a friend's recommendation, but there was a book I read this year, well, last year now, called The First 15 Lives of Harry August,
Okay.
which is sci-fi and not especially for a lot of it more direct, but very, very interesting, very beautifully written, really fun book. I can't recommend it enough. And it's by Claire North, who's an author, one of the authors with many, like with four different pseudonyms, and so like different books and different series under different kind of names. I've read a few Claire North books, and amazing. But the first 15 Lives of Harry August is one of my favorite books right now.
Nice. Good. Good. Yeah, I just I would say one of the books that really surprised me this year that I read was Lessons in Chemistry, which is not, it's barely even fiction. Um, but it was just a great book. But last month I read I love Chuck Tingle. I thought the only
Yeah,
thing I haven't read is Damascus. Um, but it's my, I don't normally read horror. It just happened across. So last month I finished Straight, which was it's rather short for him, but was it was so fun. Just his usual edgy horror that he does.
yeah,
So I'm always looking out there for, stuff because I do Audible when I do the long drives to conventions. And so I'm always like, my wife knows my style, so we own a bookstore. So she's always like, try this. And Lessons in Chemistry was like, wasn't sci-fi, wasn't speculative fiction in the slightest. And I was like, okay. But he really hit some notes because I grew up in the era and my mother was a single mom. So she had to deal with a lot of the things the lady did. It was great. But anyway, it's just one of those things where I love reading just sometimes because it surprises you what you really do, find enjoyable. Do you ever get to go to conventions yourself, or I know that, you have San Diego Comic Con out there, but there's also more like fandom cons out there. You ever get to go to those, or not something you really get into?
San Francisco and San Jose both have plenty of smaller cons as well. So there's no lack of ability. I go to the San Francisco Writers Conference some years if there's a specific thing. We have one big literary event out here called Litquake, and it lasts a whole month, and they do programming throughout the month, but 300 events, something like that.
Yeah.
And the final day of it is the Litquake pub crawl, and they do 50 events kind of throughout San Francisco. So you really have to pick who you want to see, what authors are there that year.
Yeah.
Always fun. I always try to squeeze a few Litquake events in. This year, if I get the right thing or two published in the meantime, I might do a Litquake event. This year or next year, I'm planning on leading an event at Litquake, which I've
Nice.
always wanted to do. But, until it's real, it's not, real. So we'll see. But they're a great organization. They work with kind of different levels. So they have a kid version and more adult versions, and they get as wild as anybody wants. So you can they've done readings in tattoo shops and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I definitely love them a lot, and they're my favorite kind of conference type thing.
Okay.
Otherwise, I already have to go to conferences for work, so I don't have any leftover time. Or like that could be a vacation instead.
Yeah.
So I don't travel for writers conferences, and I don't get really into them just because there's only so many weeks in a year, and I'm already doing conferences
Yeah.
that take a lot of mental load. So the ones in San Francisco I love, and I pop in, and that's as much as I can really like commit in advance.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone has different. I use them a lot just to get publicly known,
Yeah,
for the writing aspect, for get a lot of readers there, so I get a chance to um meet people early on and maybe, build a fan out of that scenario as they get to know me as a real human writer, not AI, and, maybe buy a book. And, my goal is always get the first in the series to their hand, and then hopefully they dive into the rest of the series. It's
they take
always,
it from there. Yeah.
that's always my goal. But
I don't know
all
if
right.
you've ever made it to the American Library Association convention. I go to that every year,
Uh-huh.
and I spend a morning at least going to the floor and just going down the publisher rows and seeing who's there and meeting people. And I really like that I can kind of double dip that one a little bit. But I've definitely made some great connections with publishers and gotten some good book recommendations, and
Nice.
it's always a fun one.
Yeah. No, I haven't, and I don't know that there's any out here um that are close, but I'll give it a look, see what it goes. All right, Chris, been great talking to you. We beat up a little more than 15 minutes, but it's going to be great. I appreciate you taking the time out today and talking with me, and have a good night. Thank you.
Absolutely. This was great. Have a good night yourself, and I'll see you around.
All right, bye.
Bye.